All right, hello everyone. Welcome to FlaskCon. Very excited to be here, and I will be talking about doing some testing stuff. So I am Pamela Fox. I'm currently at Microsoft, where I'm a Python cloud advocate, which means I help Python developers use Microsoft technologies, a lot of times Azure, but also VS Code and GitHub and all that fun stuff. Before Microsoft, I was teaching Python at UC Berkeley to like 2,000 students at a time. It was a ridiculous class, but I learned a lot about Python, because when you have that many students asking you questions about Python, you end up like reading specs and like you're like, okay, we figured out how iterators work, sweet. So that was a really good way to really get deep into Python. And then before that I was at Coursera, Khan Academy, both of which had Python backends to start. And I was also at Google for a while, and there I got to use Python on App Engine. So I've always liked doing full stack web development using Python as the backend language and HTML, CSS, JavaScript as the front end, and writing tests to make sure that things work. And you can find me online at all the different social media networks we have now, which is too many. Okay. So first, I just want to talk generally about testing Flask and Quart apps. And I just want to find out what everybody here is using currently. So who here is developing Flask applications? Okay, good, David, I'm glad. And then what about Quart? Do we have people using Quart? Nice, all right, hopefully we'll get some more Quart converts by the end. And then how many of you are testing? Okay, I don't know if it was the same number. I think it was slightly less. And are you using, anyone using unit tests? Does anyone use unit tests with? No. Okay, you're all using PyTest? You get a little.
We still are, trying not to.
Okay. So is everyone else using PyTest? Hands for PyTest? Yeah. All right. Sweet. Okay. So I wanted to start off with just going like basics of testing. Make sure we're all on the same page. Here's our classic testing pyramid, right? Unit tests on the bottom, then integration tests, then end-to-end tests. And I like this pyramid because it does reflect the fact that unit tests are generally the easiest to write. And you can have a lot of them, but they're not going to test your system end to end, right? So you can have 1,000 unit tests and still have a completely broken website, right? Now, end-to-end tests, though, if you have a single end-to-end test, sometimes it can capture the most important flow on your website, right? So, we see that this is, generally how it works is that it takes a lot longer to both write and run an end-to-end test, but you get a lot more return on investment. And there's actually a lot of people arguing, like it used to be that we would start at the bottom of the pyramid and then work up, but now there's actually a lot of people arguing that you should start with those end-to-end tests because they can capture so much of your working system and then move your way down. And I would argue just you should test somewhere. Like just please start somewhere, anywhere, because just in my experience, companies I worked at, especially startups, a lot of times don't start with tests and things move fast and things break. And you know that quote, move fast and break things? I hate that quote because when you move fast and break things, like who wakes up? It's like we get woken up in the middle of the night, like dealing with prod issues, right? And you're like, maybe if we had just thought about writing some tests and like maybe we could have caught it. And every time you write a postmortem, it always says we need to write more tests, right? So I don't know, I've been in so many like startups and like scrappy things that now I'm just very passionate about wanting to have tests, to have those confidence so that I can sleep through the night and wake up in the morning and it's still working. That's my goal, is to sleep. So I always use PyTest. Looks like that's really popular here. So I start off with PyTest and then use a number of extensions. We're going to be looking at all of these today, but I just wanted to have one slide that lists them all so you get an idea for which ones I'm using. So let's just look at a basic unit text here, and I can actually just go out and like open this here, right? So here I'm just testing a class, and this is pretty basic. The only thing that's fancy is that because I am using await inside this method here, then I do need to mark it with the fact that it is an async function, and I'm using async here. But other than that, this is pretty standard PyTest here. Yeah, like this, the IDE needs to be bigger, yeah? Like this, okay. Yeah, I'll try to make it bigger to the point, as long as it's not like awkwardly big. There we go, is that good? Okay, yeah, because the screens are kind of small here. Now we can move up to integration tests. There's probably different definitions of integration tests here, but here I'm talking about like testing things at the request level of our app. where when we have our app, we can say, okay, if we make a request to this endpoint, what do we get back to the endpoint, right? So I kind of think of that as the integration test. So here, like if I look at test app.py, what I have is a bunch of tests. Now this one I'm actually testing is a Quart application. That's why you're gonna see async all over the place, because it is a Quart application, so I have to use async for every single test. But other than that, it does look pretty similar to a Flask application, right? So I have a fixture, and the fixture is in this function here. The fixture involves a huge amount of mocking everything. That to me is the hardest part of writing tests, is writing the mocks. And especially if you're like mocking for an SDK that nobody else has ever mocked before. So I now think that like every SDK should just have a page that says, this is how you test with this SDK, this is how you mock it. Thank you, yes. So if we can make that happen, that'd be awesome. Okay, so here's, we create the, I create the app, and then I say, here's the test app. So this is how you do it in Quart. It looks pretty similar in Flask, and we get the test client out of it. There's a lot of mocking that happens along the way, but you can scroll up if you really want to see that. But then here, when we actually bring it in the client, we can send methods, send requests to it, and assert things. So that's cool. Now, a lot of times what I actually like to use is the snapshot, PyTest snapshot. Is anyone using that one? No, oh my gosh, okay, you should use it, it's so fun. So the idea of snapshot testing is that we take a snapshot and we save it, and it actually is saved. So I can show here, this is my snapshots folder. So we can like test app, so this one is chat handle exception, content safety down here, right? And I've also parameterized my client class, so we actually see it parameterized for each version of this this client fixture, and then we can just see this. Now this one wasn't very fancy because it was testing an exception. So let's look at something that's a little fancier. So this is actually a streamed response, because this is, I'll show you the app that it's. This is the app that it's actually testing. I happen to have it in Spanish because Spanish is a cool language, and so you can actually see that the response will stream in. So when I'm testing, I actually need to check to make sure that the streamed response is correct, right? So what I've done in the snapshot testing is that I'm just saving the full JSON, and in this case a JSON lines response. I should have started with a non-stream version. Okay, so here's a non-stream version, yeah? So this is what it would look like as like a JSON response. And this way I save the entire snapshot, and then when I run the test, I'm just checking like, hey, does the new JSON match the snapshot JSON? And if not, I'll see a diff of what changed, and I can decide, is that a diff I wanted, right? And if I do, then I just regenerate the snapshots. You just say PyTest snapshot update, it'll regenerate it. And then when you're sending the code review, the person looking at the code review can just see like, oh, okay, this is how our JSON response has changed. So it's really helpful because you can also make sure that your front end is communicated whenever there's changes. So otherwise we would have to like go and we'd have to assert every single thing about this highly nested JSON object. So most of the times I use snapshot testing whenever I'm dealing with JSON responses or JSON line responses. So I want to put a plug for that because it's been really helpful for me. And this is what it looks like. We just bring in the snapshot. We bring in the PyTest snapshot plugin, and then we bring it in as a fixture, and then say, assert the match, dump it into there. I like to pretty print because it makes for better diffs when you check it into version control, and then we get the results there. Now, if you're working across both Linux and Mac, you will need to make sure that you're using the same line endings across different systems. Otherwise, weird things will happen because it is doing an exact match. And so that's why I always have to add this whenever I'm using snapshot testing. Okay, oddly specific things. All right, so that's like testing those apps. All right, so now we can just run those tests, right? Those are our tests that should run relatively fast. So I can just run them here. Okay, and you can see, So a nice thing is that these tests are pretty fast to run, right? Everything's mocked out. It doesn't have to make any, ideally there's no network calls happening. I actually, for a while, for a couple months, the tests were running slow, and it helped me realize that there was a huge performance issue in one of the packages in one of their like recent upgrades. And so we reported to the package owner, and they were able to fix it. But it only became obvious to me when I was running the tests, because that performance issue was happening for every single test, and that time like really added up. So ideally, if things are working well, these tests should be really fast. Now, most of the time I'm actually using coverage, and I've got a lot of configuration in my PyProject.toml to say like how PyTest and coverage should go. So here I'm saying like what coverage should be checking. So coverage is a way of checking for code coverage. Anyone using coverage? All right, a few people. What other things are people using for coverage? Like CodeCov or something? You use CodeCov? Okay, is that the main? Is there anything else that people are using? Because CodeCov is nice because it actually tells you like when you're like, does it tell you when you have a PR that there's some line? Yeah, so that's really nice. I haven't figured out how to do that with Cub yet. I have that, so I do actually have that, but what I haven't figured out is how to say like that the missing, like the new, specifically that the new lines you added had been covered. And maybe that can be done with coverage. I don't know if people are doing that.
I guess it depends on what you're having to do that, because I get that, I use GitLab.
GitLab, okay.
But it's only because it's dumping out the coverage JSON that shows what's covered and what's not covered.
Yeah, you can manually do it. So that's what I tell everybody is like, okay, like you're gonna run this. And so here we see a fail under 89, and you actually see I get 91%, but that's because when we run the CI, we run it on a bunch of different systems, and on some of the systems we skip some of the tests, and our coverage is less. So we have to check, we have to keep that level at the minimum, which is 89 right now. But yeah, when we do coverage, I have it set so that it shows the missing. So I say show missing true, and because then you can just look and see like, oh, okay, I'm missing line 219 here. Like missing those lines here. So that's usually what I would do, is check that stuff and make sure that all the new lines I added are covered. You can also, of course, do an HTML output for coverage. That HTML output is beautiful because then you can actually click in the browser. You see like the red and the green of what's covered and not covered. So if you're really digging into, like if you're having like a testing party, if you ever do that at work, where you all get together and you write tests. That's the kind of thing I try to promote when I'm like at a company. I'm like, hey, let's have a testing party. We'll like increase our coverage. And I think if you like get enough free food, sometimes it works. Because then you could like just say like, all right, let's just bang it out, right? Like, or sometimes if I'm contributing to a new open source project, I'll look at their cov report and see, okay, what's not being covered, right? And then I can add some coverage. All right. So that's our unit test integration testing. So now we're going to move on to end-to-end testing with Playwright. I guess I maybe should have got, wait, when did I even start, David? Do you know when I started?
You're good.
Okay. All right. So Playwright is this package that's available for multiple languages. It was first made for Node, but then it was also ported to Python. Oh, and even Java and .NET now as well. So we can install Playwright as a Python package. And then here's the thing. Playwright is it does browser-based tests. And so you both need to install the package, which knows how to interact with browsers, but then you actually do have to install the browsers. So, and you can pick which browser you install. I usually try to only install one just so that the installation is quicker, and I don't always want to test across every single browser, but in theory you can actually also parameterize and you can run your tests across Chromium and Firefox. Typically I'm only doing Chromium, to be honest, because it's used by like both Chrome and Edge, and I don't know what's going on with Firefox usage so far these days. But sometimes I'll do Firefox. I think I have Firefox in one of them. Ideally you would do them in both, but it just depends on time. So you can do that. But you can also you can change this command to be more specific. I don't know what that you have mail means. Like, do I really have? It told me that for 2 years. I don't know where that mail is. Should I know where that mail is? Okay. Anyway, I always see it and wonder. And then think about that movie. Okay, so here, this is how I would install just Chromium. And basically, you always need the deps. I don't know why they just don't make it default, because you just always need the deps, the dependencies. So normally, I'm doing something like this. All right, so for Playwright, we can open up a browser, and we can do it either in headless mode or headed, and then we can visit a web page. So we're going to do that with FlaskCon. Yay. All right, so here we have this example. And I'm going to say Python, and where did I put this? Okay, Playwright example. All right. So what it should do is pop up. Oh, yeah, it didn't even pop it up because it's in headless mode. It's so fast. Okay, so it went to the page and it got back the title. Now, let's actually watch it happen. So I think we'll say like headed. It's either going to be headed equals true or headless equals false. Okay, I think that looked good. No, I made it up. Yeah, I'm like making stuff. All right, let's try this. Headless equals false. All right, do you see that? The Chromium popped up and it went away. Okay, it was really fast because we didn't do very much. But that's the idea. It's opening up a browser, it defaults to headless, but you can actually watch that browser if you want to. So that's basic Playwright. And sometimes it can be useful just if you're not doing testing. Like sometimes I'm using it if I'm doing kind of like screen scraping stuff, but trying to scrape pages that have JavaScript in it. So you want to open them up with Playwright, wait for all the JavaScript to load, and then you can, make away with their data. So we have the Playwright team puts out a PyTest plugin, which is pytest-playwright, and that gives you a page fixture. So we can use that page fixture in our tests in order to basically do the same thing. So I have that example here. And you can see we get the page fixture. I even added a type annotation just so I could get my nice IntelliSense here. And that we're going to go to the page. And then we're going to do expects to see, okay, does it contain this text? Does it contain this heading? And is this heading visible? And then we could even do some interaction. So the only interaction I could find was to click on the link because we don't actually have any other interaction on the page. So, I click on the link and I expect a pop-up to come up, right? Other pages, you might click on a button, something might happen. You might enter some text into a form, something might happen, right? All the kinds of things we can do with the page. So to run that, we're going to use the PyTest command, and then I'm going to run that specific test, okay, like this, all right. And this is gonna, once again, default, it should default to headless. And that ran. So that was like relatively quick, but of course when you have a lot of these, it's certainly gonna be slower than a typical test. Now we can say, headless? Headed. I feel like headed is a thing for one of these commands, which is why, yes, now it's headed, okay. So then we saw it happen, yeah. All right. Okay, so now here's the thing is that when I usually write end-to-end tests, what I do is that I make a file name that does not have test underscore in it. Because the normal way that we write our tests is we have either test underscore or underscore test, and those get picked up by the auto discovery mechanisms of PyTest or other testing tools. But I don't usually want my Playwright tests to be auto-discovered because they're a lot slower than my other tests, right? So I like to differentiate between my Playwright tests and my other tests. So I'll always give them, almost always I give them a different name that can't be auto-discovered that I have to manually run. So it's going to depend on you, like whether that makes sense, but it's what I do, especially in my larger repos, right? So here, I'm just going to explicitly pass in, this is the big one, and I'll do this in headed so you can watch a lot of things go by, which is usually pretty fun. This is of the application we were seeing earlier. And what's really fun is you're going to see the browser pop up at different sizes there. So I'm actually doing parameterized sizes for this because we had some issues that were popping up due to responsive CSS, like at different browser sizes, and we wanted to make sure that that there weren't any issues with this responsive CSS. So we've actually parameterized the tests so that they're going to check things at multiple breakpoints. I think this one's like a tab. That looks like a tablet breakpoint there, right? I think we have 3 or 4 different breakpoints. So you can see them running, and I'll just while that's running, I can show a little bit more in the code. Okay, actually it's really distracting because it keeps popping up. All right, so there you go, they're running, they're gonna pass. Trust it, okay. All right, so a couple interesting things that we do here is that when we're doing, so when I was doing the integration test, I used the test client, 5 minutes. Okay, all right, I'll go. All right, so when I did integration test, I used that test client and I just sent things to the test client. But here, I actually need to start up a local server that is fully running the app because I need the JavaScript, I need the CSS, I need everything to be loaded in. So I've got all this code here that actually will run the application using, we like run the application using a process, and we check for a free port. We wait to make sure the server's ready because it takes a little time to start up, and then that all becomes this fixture, the live server URL. Now you can also use PyTest Flask to get this kind of functionality. I think that David was actually helping me debug this code because I was like trying to figure out whether to use PyTest Flask or my own code, and I do both. Here you can see the fixture for the pages. And the thing that is interesting here that I wanted to point out is that when we send a request, when the user, the fake user, the Playwright user, clicks something that sends a request to our backend, I mock that out using this handler here, and I use the result of the snapshot tests. So I really like that because what happens is I run those snapshot tests first. Now I've got snapshots. Now I can feed those to my end-to-end tests, and that makes sure that they keep in line. So I really like keeping all of that in line, and it just makes me more confident that that the front end is actually going to handle what's coming out of the back end. All right, so that's cool. Okay, so there we go. And then if the tests fail, you have multiple options. You can retain a trace of the run, right? So if we had a failure, I think I actually have one still saved, maybe from a failure last night. Let me see. No, I deleted it. It's really cool though. So I do want to make it fail. All right. Well, I don't think I have time to make it fail. So basically, you load this in, and it shows you the trace of it failing over time, and you actually can click on it and see it change over time. So you can get this trace, and that's really nice. You can also record a video, or you can record a screenshot. I always do this, especially in GitHub Actions. You can do this, and then your GitHub Actions can upload that to your artifacts. And then you can just download it from your artifacts, and then you can do Playwright Show Trace, or you can use that online trace viewer. And you'll be able to just see what the website looked like at the point where it failed and couldn't find that locator. Now, there's a lot of code here. I didn't necessarily write all this code. What I often do is use the code gen tool. So here, what we just I'm so good at command line, you can tell. All right, oh yeah, this is just because my computer is funny. I'm just gonna go like this and get rid of Python-M, and it's gonna work because everything makes sense. All right, so this opens up the site, and then what I can do, I can just click on it and pretend okay, I'm a user, I'm doing this, and it's actually just uploading the code here. And what's interesting here is that it tries to come up with the optimal selector. And what you see is most of the time it is not a CSS selector. If any of you used Selenium in the past, we would use CSS selectors, right? And we would spend all our time doing CSS selectors or doing data test ID equals blah, yeah. That's not the Playwright approach. The Playwright approach is to try and generate code that is actually very much like what the user, because the theory is that what the user sees is less likely to change than your CSS class names and your IDs, which I think is a really good theory, right? So, here in this case it says, okay, we're gonna get the heading that says we are in room, right? We're gonna get this other heading, we're gonna get this text. So that's what it does, and here, this is I clicked it, and it got the link with that name. So it really tries to focus on what the user would see, and that's what's really nice about the code gen, because if I was doing this normally, especially because I come from Selenium, I would just be sitting there going ooh, what does my CSS look like, right? But here, it really focuses on what does the user see and generates that. So I will typically start off with this to do my basic test, and then kind of once I've figured out generally what they look like, then I'll write the rest of the test there. So that is code gen. All right, accessibility testing. Let me think what the short version of this is. Let me go forward. Okay, so basically what I do is for accessibility testing, I have a couple plugins that you can try out that will check for accessibility pages issues in the rendered pages, right? So these are just running on my personal websites. So we're doing, where's the, Axe analysis, okay. Yeah, so this one's really simple. I just go through every page and I check and I run Axe, which is an accessibility checker, which looks at the actual HTML of the page. That's why we need Playwright. So once we have the HTML of the page, we can send that to Playwright, and we checked in this case to make sure that the violations are 0. So my website is perfectly accessible. To be fair, it's a very simple website, but still, you gotta strive for something in life, right? Now, most of the times you are going to have some violations, right? So in that case, what I do is basically like snapshots of my accessibility violations and comparisons to make sure that we haven't gone down. So I have another like way of using the plugin in here, and you can see this where I'm just doing like axe PyTest snapshot page, and that will check, it'll make a snapshot in here of like any current issues. I actually don't know. Okay, there. So these are accessibility issues, heading order. That's a classic one. I actually found this I ran this on the PyCon website today, and it has that. Okay, and then there's some other like region issues there. So it'll put those in the snapshots, and so then you will see in your version control, in your code review, you would see if anything changed. And when you run the PyTest, it'll actually tell you whether it got better or got worse. And I have some output there that shows it. So if you are interested in accessibility testing, do check that out. I do have a whole talk on that I did at North Bay PyCon that is on YouTube, and I also have 2 blog posts about it too that you can dig into more, because I obviously put too much in this talk. But also you can go through these slides. So yeah, there's lots of resources. You can use in GitHub Actions. You can use Playwright for your smoke test, because you could go against an actual server URL. So I do that in a few places too. There you probably want to do a subset of the test, because don't have much time. You don't necessarily check as much stuff. And here we go. There's the slides. There's the example repos that I showed that have tests. And there's where you can reach out if you have any follow-up. Thank you, everyone.